"Don't get in the car." The words left my mouth before my brain could catch up, sharp and wrong and far too loud for a Tuesday night shift that was supposed to end quietly. The rain had been falling for hours, steady and relentless, turning the parking lot outside Marlowe's Grill into a mirror of smeared lights and distorted reflections. My sneakers were already soaked through from running plates out to impatient customers, and the cold had settled into my bones in that slow, stubborn way that made everything feel heavier. I should have been thinking about my rent, about the overdue notice folded in my apron pocket, about the fact that I'd worked a double shift and still wasn't sure how I'd cover groceries this week. Instead, I was staring at a man I didn't know, watching him reach for the handle of a black SUV that looked like it belonged in a different world than mine. Everything about him felt wrong in the way lightning feels wrong before it strikes. Not loud, not obvious, just inevitable. I didn't know his name then. I didn't know why the air around him seemed to shift, why people instinctively moved out of his path without looking directly at him, why the two men standing a few feet behind him weren't really watching the rain. They were watching everything else. I only knew one thing. The small red flicker beneath the frame of his car wasn't supposed to be there. It pulsed once, then again, faint, easy to miss if you weren't already looking for something to go wrong. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was a reflection, a trick of water and light and exhaustion. But my chest tightened anyway. My breath caught halfway in, like my body had made a decision my mind hadn't approved yet. He stepped closer to the car. The rain rolled off his coat in clean lines, like it didn't dare cling to him. His hand lifted. Slow. Controlled. The kind of movement that didn't rush because it never had to. I felt my feet move before I decided to follow. One step, then another. My heart started to pound. Not fast, but heavy. Like it was warning me. Like it had seen something I hadn't fully understood yet. "Don't get in." It came out quieter this time, almost swallowed by the rain. He didn't react. Of course he didn't. Why would he? To him, I was just another waitress in a cheap uniform, standing under a flickering streetlight with wet hair stuck to her face and nothing important to say. People like him didn't listen to people like me. That's what the world had taught me so far. But the light blinked again, brighter this time, closer to the fuel line, and something inside me snapped into place. "Don't get in." My hand shot forward before I could stop it, fingers wrapping around his wrist. Warm, solid, real. The moment I touched him, everything changed. He turned. Fast. Not startled. Never startled. But precise. Controlled. His eyes locked onto mine, dark and sharp and unreadable in a way that made my stomach drop. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. Up close, he didn't just look powerful. He felt it. Like gravity had shifted slightly in his direction. Like the air itself paid attention to him. The men behind him moved instantly. I didn't see the motion. I felt it, like tension snapping tight across the space around us. My grip tightened without meaning to. "Please," I said, and I hated how small my voice sounded compared to everything else. "Just don't." He didn't ask why. He didn't look confused. He just studied me, like I was a problem he hadn't decided how to solve yet. And then, the world split open. The sound didn't come first. The light did. A sudden, violent flash that erased the night for a fraction of a second. Then the force followed, a wave of heat and pressure that pushed the air out of my lungs and sent the rain scattering in every direction like it had been thrown. I stumbled back, my hand slipping from his wrist as instinct took over. The black SUV was gone. Not vanished, transformed. Flames twisted where it had been, orange and gold against the gray sky, rising fast and bright in a way that didn't belong to anything normal. My ears rang, not from pain, but from the sheer wrongness of it all. The parking lot, the restaurant, the quiet end of a shift, it all felt like something from a different life, one that had ended a second ago without asking permission. I blinked, trying to steady myself, trying to understand what I'd just seen. My hands were shaking. My chest hurt from holding too much. Air and not enough at the same time. And then I realized, he was still standing, right in front of me, unmoved, untouched, alive. His eyes were still on me. Not wide, not grateful, focused, calculating, like the explosion hadn't surprised him as much as I had. "How did you know?" His voice was low, controlled, cutting clean through the ringing in my ears like it belonged to a different frequency. I opened my mouth, closed it. I didn't have an answer that made sense. I barely understood it myself. I I admitted finally, my voice unsteady but honest. I just saw something. I think. The rain started to come back into focus around us, softer now, like it had decided to pretend nothing had happened. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear sirens beginning to rise, faint but growing. Too late. Way too late. He took a step closer. Not aggressive. Not gentle. Just deliberate. Like every movement he made had already been decided before he executed it. Up close, I could see the small details I'd missed before. The way his jaw tightened slightly. The way his gaze didn't just look at me, it measured me. You pulled me back, he said, almost to himself. Not a question. A fact. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure why that mattered. He glanced once toward the burning wreckage, then back at me. No panic. No confusion. Just understanding forming behind his eyes. And something else. Something heavier. Then you changed something tonight. His voice dropped just enough that I had to focus to hear it over the rain. Something you don't understand yet. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the cold. I wanted to step back. I didn't. My feet felt rooted in place. Like moving now would mean admitting I'd just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. The sirens were louder now. Closer. Lights beginning to reflect off the wet pavement in red and blue streaks. But he didn't look at them. He didn't look away from me. From this moment on, he said quietly, his eyes holding mine in a way that made the rest of the world feel distant and irrelevant. You don't walk alone anymore. I swallowed hard, my pulse racing now for a completely different reason. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what I had just stepped into. But as the flames crackled behind him and the sirens closed in, one thing became painfully clear. Whatever my life had been before this night, whatever small, predictable path I had been walking, it had just ended. And I had no idea what I had just been pulled into. The sirens were not the first thing that made me realize I was in trouble. It was the way his men moved. Fast, but not chaotic. Controlled. Like this was not their first time standing in the middle of something that should have been impossible to ignore. One of them spoke quietly into his sleeve, voice low and precise, while the other shifted just enough to place himself between us and the growing lights in the distance. Not protecting him, protecting the space around him. And somehow, that space now included me. I should have stepped back. I should have said thank you and walked away, disappeared into the night like none of this had ever happened. That was what normal people did. That was what I had always done. Keep your head down. Do not get involved. Do not attract attention. Survive quietly. But my feet did not move. Because he had not moved either. Adrian Vale. I did not know his name yet, but I could feel the weight of it in the way everyone else reacted to him. He stood there like the fire behind him was just background noise, like the flashing red and blue lights approaching from down the street were someone else's problem. His attention stayed on me. Not drifting. Not distracted. Locked. You saw something, he said. Not accusing. Not questioning. Just placing the words between us like a fact that needed to be examined. I swallowed, my throat dry despite the rain. I thought I did, I said carefully. It was just a light. I almost ignored it. His gaze sharpened, just slightly. Enough for me to notice. Enough for me to understand that every word mattered now. But you did not. It was not praise. It was evaluation. I shook my head. No, for a second, neither of us spoke. The rain filled the silence, tapping against the pavement, soft and steady like it was trying to smooth over what had just happened. I could feel the cold seeping back into my skin, the shock wearing off and leaving something sharper behind. Awareness. Fear, maybe. Not of him. Not yet. Of everything else that suddenly felt different. One of his men stepped closer, leaning in just enough to speak without raising his voice. We need to move. Now. He did not look away from me when he answered. In a moment, the man hesitated. Not because he disagreed. Because he understood exactly what that meant. We were not leaving until this was resolved. And somehow, I was part of that resolution. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. Look, I did not mean to get involved. I said quickly, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. I just saw something strange and I reacted. I can go. I will not say anything. I do not even know what this is. He tilted his head slightly, studying me like I had just said something interesting rather than something desperate. That is exactly the problem. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? He finally glanced toward the burning remains of the vehicle, then back at me. You do not know what this is, he repeated. But someone else does. And they will assume you do. The weight of his words settled over me slowly, like cold water filling a space I had not realized was empty. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Because he was right. I did not understand any of this. But whoever had placed that device under his car did. And from their perspective, I had just interfered. The sirens were close now. Too close. The first patrol car turned into the lot, lights flashing across the wet pavement, painting everything in sharp, shifting colors. I instinctively stepped back, my body reacting before my mind caught up. Authority meant questions. Questions meant answers. And I did not have any that would make sense. He noticed. Of course he did. You are thinking about explaining this, he said quietly. Do not. I blinked. Why? His expression did not change, but something in his eyes hardened, just enough to make the air feel heavier. Because by the time you finish explaining, you will already be in danger. The officer stepped out of the car, hand resting near his belt, scanning the scene with practiced caution. Another vehicle pulled in behind him. More lights. More attention. Too much attention. I felt my pulse spike. Again, faster this time. Not from shock. From realization. I did not do anything wrong, I said, more to myself than to him. He looked at me like that sentence belonged to a different world. That does not matter tonight. The officer started walking toward us, his voice cutting through the rain. Everyone stay where you are. We need statements. I took another step back. My instinct was screaming now. Leave. Get out. Go back to the life you understand. But there was nowhere to go that would make this disappear. Not anymore. He moved then. Just one step. But it changed everything. He closed the distance between us, not aggressively, not forcefully, just enough to make it clear that I was no longer standing alone. His presence was not comforting. It was something else entirely. Something heavier. More final. Listen to me, he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear it. You have two choices right now. I met his gaze, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. What choices? You walk toward them, he said, nodding slightly toward the approaching officers. And you try to explain something you do not understand to people who cannot protect you from what comes next. He paused, just long enough for that to sink in. Or you walk with me. The words hung in the air between us, simple and impossible at the same time. Walk with him. Into what? I did not know who he was. I did not know what he was involved in. I did not know why someone would want him gone badly enough to set something like that up. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. The moment I grabbed his wrist, my life had shifted. And there was no going back to before. The officer was only a few steps away now. Close enough to see my face clearly. Close enough to ask questions I could not answer. I looked at him one last time, searching for something in his expression that would tell me this was a mistake. That I should run. That I should choose safety over whatever this was. But there was no doubt in his eyes. No hesitation. Just certainty. The kind that did not leave room for second guesses. If I walk with you, I whispered, my voice barely steady. What happens? To me? He held my gaze, unflinching. You stay alive. The officer opened his mouth to speak. I made my choice before he could say a word. I turned away from the flashing lights and stepped toward him. I did not look back. Not at the flashing lights. Not at the officer calling out for me to stop. Not at the life I had been standing in just seconds ago. My feet moved forward like they belonged to someone else. Each step heavier than the last. Each one sealing something I did not fully understand yet. The rain felt colder now, sharper against my skin, like the world had shifted from something familiar into something that no longer cared whether I was ready for it. Adrian moved beside me without hesitation, his pace steady, controlled, as if he had already decided exactly how this would unfold. One of his men opened the rear door of a black sedan that had appeared without me noticing, its engine running, its windows dark enough to reflect nothing back. The inside looked too clean, too quiet, like a space untouched by the chaos we had just left behind. I stopped just short of the door, my hand hovering near the frame, but not quite touching it. This was the line. I could feel it. The point where everything before and everything after would never meet again. If I get in, I said, my voice lower now, steadier than I expected, there is no going back, is there? He did not rush his answer. He never rushed anything. No, he said simply. No lies. No softening. Just truth. And somehow, that made it harder to step away. I nodded once, more to myself than to him, and climbed inside. The door closed behind me with a quiet, final sound that echoed louder in my chest than the explosion had. The world outside became muted instantly, the noise of sirens and rain fading into a distant hum. I sat there for a second, hands resting in my lap, trying to slow my breathing, trying to understand what I had just done. Adrian slid in across from me, the space shifting again the moment he entered, like the car itself adjusted around his presence. One of his men took the front seat. Another remained outside for a brief moment before speaking quietly through the window. The perimeter is compromised. We will need to reroute. Adrian gave a small nod. Do it. The door shut, and the car began to move, smooth and controlled, pulling away from the scene without urgency, without panic, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. I turned my head slightly, just enough to catch a glimpse of the parking lot through the tinted glass. The lights blurred together, red and blue streaking across the wet pavement, the place already transforming into something distant, something unreal. Then it was gone. I faced forward again, my reflection faint in the dark window across from me. For a moment, I did not recognize the girl staring back. Her hair was damp, her uniform wrinkled, her eyes wide but focused in a way they had never been before. She looked like someone who had stepped into a story she did not choose. What is your name? His voice broke through the silence, calm and measured. I blinked, pulled back into the moment. Lily, I said. Lily Carter. He studied me again, like he was committing it to memory, like names mattered in ways I did not yet understand. Lily Carter, he repeated quietly. Then, after a brief pause, Adrian Vale. The name settled between us, heavy with something unspoken. I did not need context to know it meant something. The way he said it told me enough. You already knew that, I said before I could stop myself. One corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, but close enough to acknowledge the truth in it. I know many things. I let out a small breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. That does not make this any less insane. No, he agreed. It does not. The honesty in his tone caught me off guard. I had expected denial, control, something that would make this feel less real. Instead, he let it sit there, exactly as it was. The car turned onto a quieter street, the city lights thinning out, the noise fading further into the background. The farther we moved, the more the tension in my chest shifted. It did not disappear. It changed, from panic into something else. Something sharper. Awareness. You said someone will think I know something. I said, my voice more steady now. Why would they think that? He leaned back slightly, his gaze never leaving mine. Because you interfered at the exact moment their plan was supposed to succeed. My fingers tightened slightly against my lap. I did not even know there was a plan. They do not know that. The simplicity of it made my stomach twist. I looked down for a second, processing, trying to keep up with the logic of a world that moved faster than mine ever had. So what happens now? I asked. Now, he said, they will try to understand what went wrong. I looked back up at him. And when they cannot, his expression did not change. They will start removing variables. The words were calm. Too calm. Like he was explaining something routine, something expected. And suddenly, I understood why he had given me a choice back there. It had never been about trust. It had been about survival. I swallowed hard, the reality settling deeper. And I am a variable now. Yes. No hesitation. No apology. Just truth again. I let out a slow breath, my mind racing through possibilities that all seemed to end the same way. There was no safe version of this anymore. Not for me. Not after what had happened. So what am I to you? I asked, the question slipping out before I could filter it. A witness? A liability? He was quiet for a moment, considering, not dismissing the question, weighing it. At the moment, he said finally, you are the reason I am still alive. My chest tightened slightly at the way he said it. Not emotional. Not dramatic. Just factual. That makes you important. I held his gaze, searching for something behind the words. Important does not sound safe. This time, there was the faintest shift in his expression. Not quite a smile. Something softer. Almost. No, he said. It does not. The car slowed slightly as we approached a set of gates I had not noticed until they were already opening. Tall, black, silent. They parted without hesitation, like they had been expecting us. As we passed through, the world outside disappeared completely, replaced by something else entirely. Something quieter. Controlled. Isolated. I felt my breath catch again, not from fear this time, but from the realization that this was not temporary. This was not a detour. This was a different world, and I was already inside it. Adrian's voice came again, low and certain, cutting through my thoughts like a line drawn in ink. Lily Carter, he said, my name sounding different now, heavier, like it carried more weight than it had an hour ago. Whatever you thought your life was before tonight. He paused, just long enough for me to feel the shift coming before he finished it. It is not anymore. I looked at him, really looked this time, and for the first time since all of this began, I believed him completely. The gates closed behind us with a quiet finality that felt louder than anything I had heard all night. Not a slam, not a warning, just a soft, deliberate click that echoed somewhere deep in my chest. I did not realize I had been holding my breath until it came out in a slow, uneven exhale. The car continued forward, tires gliding over smooth pavement, the world outside replaced by long stretches of carefully lit driveway and shadows that felt intentional rather than empty. I pressed my fingers lightly against my knees, grounding myself in something real, something physical, because everything else felt like it was slipping just out of reach. Where are we? I asked, my voice quieter now, steadier, but still carrying the weight of everything that had just happened. Adrian did not answer immediately. He looked out the window for a brief second, as if confirming something only he could see, then back at me. Somewhere safe, he said. The words should have been reassuring. They were not. Safe meant controlled. Safe meant hidden. Safe meant I was no longer part of the world I understood. The car slowed as we approached a large structure rising out of the darkness ahead, its outline sharp against the dim glow of strategically placed lights. It was not just a house. It was something else entirely. Too large to be personal. Too precise to be casual. Every line, every angle, every light felt deliberate. Calculated. Like it had been designed not just to be seen, but to be protected. I swallowed, my gaze tracing the edges of it as we pulled closer. You live here? I asked. Yes. One word. No explanation. No elaboration. Of course not. The car came to a smooth stop in front of the entrance, and before I could fully process it, the door beside me opened. One of his men stood there, silent, waiting. Not for him. For me. That realization hit differently. I hesitated for half a second, just long enough to feel the weight of stepping out of the car and into something I could not walk away from. Then I moved. The air outside felt different. Cooler. Still. The rain had softened into a mist, barely noticeable now, clinging to the edges of everything without making a sound. I stepped onto the stone driveway, my shoes quiet against the surface, my reflection faint in the polished black of the car beside me. Adrian stepped out after me, his presence shifting the space again in a way I was starting to recognize, but not yet understand. The front doors opened before we reached them. No knock. No hesitation. Just silent acknowledgement that he had arrived. Inside, everything changed again. The warmth hit first. Subtle, controlled, like the temperature had been set precisely to avoid discomfort. Then the light. Soft, but intentional, illuminating the space without exposing too much. The floors were polished, the ceilings high, the walls lined with details I could not fully take in because there were too many at once. It felt less like a home and more like a place where decisions were made. Important ones. Final ones. I stopped just inside the entrance, my eyes adjusting, my mind trying to catch up. This is, I started, then stopped, because I did not know how to finish that sentence. He watched me, not impatient, not amused, just observing. Different, he offered. I let out a small breath. That is one word for it. A man stepped forward from the side, older, composed, his posture straight in a way that suggested discipline rather than age. His eyes moved from Adrian to me, not lingering, but not dismissing either. Assessing. Everything is secure, he said, his voice calm, steady. No external breaches detected. Adrian gave a slight nod. Good. The man's gaze shifted back to me for a fraction of a second, just long enough to register that I did not belong here. Then he stepped back, disappearing into the background like he had never been the focus at all. I wrapped my arms lightly around myself, not from cold, but from the need to hold on to something familiar. So this is it? I asked. This is where I stay now. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth. Like I was talking about someone else's life instead of my own. Adrian moved a few steps further into the room, then turned back to face me fully. For now, he said. Until the situation is resolved. I frowned slightly. And how long does that take? He held my gaze, unflinching. That depends on how quickly I find out who was responsible. The way he said it made it clear that this was not a passive process. This was not waiting. This was action. Controlled, precise, inevitable. I shifted my weight slightly, my mind racing through everything that had led me here. A blinking light. A split-second decision. A hand on his wrist. And now this. You still have not told me what you actually do? I said, the question slipping out before I could stop it. He did not react immediately. Of course he did not. He considered the question like it was something that needed to be weighed, measured, placed correctly before being answered. I manage things, he said finally. I stared at him for a second. That is not an answer. It is enough of one for tonight. I let out a breath, frustration mixing with everything else. You are asking me to trust you without telling me anything. He stepped closer then, not quickly, not aggressively, just enough to shift the distance between us again. Not close enough to intimidate. Close enough to be clear. I am not asking you to trust me, he said quietly. I am telling you that you do not have a better option right now. The honesty hit harder than anything else he could have said. No manipulation. No false comfort. Just reality. I looked away for a second, my eyes drifting across the room, taking in details I had not noticed before. Cameras, subtle but present. Doors that were probably locked in ways I could not see. People moving quietly in the background. Always aware, always watching. This was not just a house. It was a system, and I was now inside it. Do I at least get a room? I asked, my voice softer now, less defensive, more tired. Yes. And a phone. A brief pause. No. I closed my eyes for a second, letting that settle. Of course not. Of course I did not get to call anyone, explain anything, pretend this was temporary in a way that made sense. When I opened them again, he was still watching me. Not judging. Not dismissing. Just present. You are adjusting faster than most would, he said. I gave a small, tired smile that did not quite reach my eyes. I do not think I have a choice. You do, he said. I looked at him, confused. What choice? His voice lowered slightly, just enough to make the words feel more personal, more direct. How you handle what comes next. The statement lingered between us, heavier than anything else he had said so far. Because it was not about survival anymore. It was about something else. Something I had not yet defined. I took a slow breath, straightening slightly, feeling the weight of everything settle into something more stable. Not comfort. Not yet. But something closer to acceptance. Then I guess I should start figuring that out, I said quietly. His gaze held mine for a moment longer, something unreadable flickering beneath the surface. Then he gave a small nod. You will. And for the first time since I stepped into this world, I felt it. Not safety. Not certainty. But the unmistakable sense that whatever came next, he was not going to let me face it alone. I did not sleep. Not really. The room they gave me was bigger than my entire apartment, quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like even the walls knew how to keep secrets. The bed was soft, the kind that was supposed to make you forget everything else, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. The flicker under the car. The moment his hand almost touched the door. The light. The shift. I turned onto my side, then my back, then sat up entirely, pressing my palms against my face as if that would slow my thoughts down. It did not. Nothing about this felt temporary anymore. That was the part that settled deepest. Not the explosion. Not the danger. The certainty. I stood up, moving quietly across the room, my bare feet barely making a sound against the polished floor. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, overlooking a section of the property that was lit just enough to see movement without revealing details. Even at this hour, there were people outside. Walking. Watching. Always aware. This place did not sleep. I wrapped my arms around myself again, staring out into the controlled darkness, trying to piece together something that made sense. I had spent my entire life learning how to stay invisible. Keep your head down. Do your job. Do not ask questions that lead to complicated answers. And now, somehow, I was standing in the center of something I could not even define. A quiet knock broke through my thoughts. Soft. Precise. Not a question. A notification. I turned, my body tensing automatically. Yes. The door opened just enough for a woman to step inside, her movements calm, practiced. She carried a small tray with a glass of water and something warm that smelled faintly like tea. Her expression was neutral, but not cold. Observant. You should try to rest, she said gently, placing the tray on a nearby table. It has been a long night. I let out a small breath, almost a laugh. That is one way to put it. She studied me for a moment, then nodded slightly, like she understood more than I had said. Mr. Vale asked that you be comfortable. I glanced at the bed, then back at her. Comfortable is not really the problem. Her lips curved just slightly, not quite a smile, but close. No, I imagine it is not. She stepped back toward the door, pausing briefly. If you need anything, there is someone outside at all times. Of course there was. The door closed quietly behind her, leaving the room exactly as it had been. Still, controlled. I stared at the tea for a moment before picking it up, the warmth grounding me just enough to take a slow sip. It helped. A little. Not enough. I set it down again and moved back toward the window, my mind circling the same questions over and over. Who would do something like that? Why him? And more importantly, why did it feel like this was only the beginning? The door opened again. This time, without a knock. I turned immediately, my body reacting before my mind caught up. Adrian stood in the doorway, his presence filling the space in a way that made everything else feel secondary. He had changed, his coat gone, replaced with something darker, simpler, but no less precise. He looked exactly the same and completely different at the same time. Awake. Focused. Like the night had not taken anything from him. You are. Not sleeping, he observed. Not a question. I leaned lightly against the edge of the table, crossing my arms without thinking. I tried. He stepped inside, the door closing behind him with that same quiet finality I was starting to recognize. Trying is not the same as succeeding. I let out a small breath. I do not think sleep is really an option right now. He studied me for a moment, his gaze steady, not intrusive, but impossible to ignore. That will change. I raised an eyebrow slightly. You sound very sure. I am. The confidence in his voice was not arrogant. It was something else. Something rooted in experience. In control. He moved further into the room, stopping just a few feet away, close enough that I could see the details I had missed before. The slight tension in his jaw. The way his eyes shifted, always aware, always calculating. There are things you need to understand, he said. My chest tightened slightly. That sounds serious. It is. I straightened a little, my instincts sharpening. Okay. He held my gaze, making sure I was fully present before he continued. What happened tonight was not random. I nodded slowly. I figured that much. It was planned, he continued. Carefully. Precisely. His voice did not change, but the weight behind it did. And it failed. I swallowed, my fingers tightening slightly against my arms. Because of me. He did not hesitate. Yes. The honesty still hit the same way. Clean. Direct. Unavoidable. I looked down for a second, processing, then back up. So now what? He took a small breath, like he was organizing his thoughts before placing them in front of me. Now, the people responsible will be trying to understand what went wrong. You said that before, I replied quietly. And when they cannot, they start removing variables. He nodded once. Correct. The room felt a little smaller suddenly. Not physically, mentally. Like the walls had shifted just enough to remind me where I was. And I am still one of those variables, I said. Yes. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay steady. Then why bring me here? Why not just... I stopped, the rest of the sentence catching in my throat before I could finish it. His gaze did not waver. Because you are not just a variable. I frowned slightly. Then what am I? He stepped closer, just enough to shift the space between us again, his voice lowering slightly, more deliberate now. You are the only person outside of my organization who saw something before it happened. The words settled differently this time. Not fear. Not confusion. Something else. Importance. That makes you valuable, he added. I let out a small breath, shaking my head slightly. I do not feel valuable. That will change too. I looked at him, really looked this time, trying to understand what was underneath all of this. And what happens when you find out who did this? He was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable, his thoughts moving somewhere I could not follow. Then I make sure it does not happen again. The simplicity of it made something in my chest tighten again. Not because I did not understand. Because I did. I nodded slowly, accepting more than I was comfortable admitting. And me? I asked softly. What happens to me when all of this is over? His eyes held mine, steady, unflinching. And for the first time since this began, There was something different there. Not calculation. Not strategy. Something quieter. More personal. That depends, he said, on what you become. The words lingered long after he finished speaking, settling into something I could not ignore. Because for the first time, it was not just about surviving what had already happened. It was about who I was going to be after it. The silence after his words did not feel empty. It felt full, like something had been placed between us that neither of us could take back. I stood there for a moment, letting it settle, letting the weight of what he said sink deeper than I was ready for. What you become, not where you go, not how you survive. What you become, that was different. That meant this was not temporary, not in the way I had been hoping. I looked away first, my gaze drifting toward the window again, toward the controlled darkness outside that no longer felt distant. You talk like this is something I am choosing, I said quietly, like I have time to figure it out. Behind me, I heard him shift slightly, the subtle movement of fabric, the quiet presence that never really left the room, even when he was not speaking. You always have a choice, he said. I let out a small breath, shaking my head. That does not feel true right now. That is because you are looking at the situation, he replied. Not at yourself. I frowned slightly, turning back to face him. What is that supposed to mean? He held my gaze, steady, patient in a way that did not feel condescending. Most people would have ignored what they saw tonight. I crossed my arms again without thinking. Most people would not have noticed it. No, he said. They would have noticed. They would have chosen not to act. The words hit differently. Not like praise. Like a statement of fact. I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped. Because I could not. I had seen it. I had hesitated. And then I had moved anyway. That was not a choice. I said, my voice softer now. That was instinct. Instinct is where your real decisions come from, he said. Everything else is negotiation. I stared at him for a second, trying to process that, trying to decide if it made sense or if it was just another way of looking at the world that only someone like him could afford. And what does that say about me? I asked. His answer came without hesitation. That you act when it matters. The room felt quieter after that. Not empty. Focused. Like everything unnecessary had been stripped away, leaving only what mattered. I looked down briefly, my fingers tracing the edge of the table beside me, grounding myself again. And that is supposed to be a good thing? I asked. Tonight, it kept you alive. I let out a slow breath, nodding slightly. Fair point. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was different now. Less tense. More aware. Like we were both adjusting to the new shape of this conversation. What happens next? I asked finally. He moved slightly, stepping closer to the window, his gaze shifting outward for a moment before returning to me. Next, we find out who failed tonight. Failed, I repeated. You say that like it is personal. It is. The simplicity of the answer made it clear there was more behind it than he was saying. Of course there was. There was always more. I hesitated, then took a small step forward, closing some of the distance between us without fully realizing I was doing it. And how? Do you do that? I asked. He watched me for a moment, then answered. By looking at who benefits from the attempt. I frowned slightly. You mean who wanted you gone? Yes. That sounds like a long list. It is. I let out a quiet breath, glancing away again, my mind trying to wrap around the scale of that statement. So where do you even start? With the ones who thought they had the best chance. His voice remained calm, but there was something sharper underneath it now. Focus. Intent. And the ones who had access. I nodded slowly. Inside access. His gaze held mine again. Exactly. The realization settled in, slow but undeniable. Someone close to you, I said. Someone who knew your routine. He did not confirm it directly. He did not need to. The silence did that for him. I felt a chill run through me, deeper than the cold from earlier. Not fear. Not exactly. Something more complex. That is worse than I thought, I admitted quietly. Yes. I looked at him again, studying him in a way I had not allowed myself to before. Not just the presence. Not just the control. The person underneath it. Or at least, the parts he allowed to be seen. And you were just calm about it? I asked. Someone tried to end your life tonight, and you are standing here like this is just another problem to solve. His expression did not change, but something in his eyes shifted slightly. Not softer. Not harder. Just clearer. Because it is. The certainty in his voice did not feel cold. It felt practiced. Like this was not new. Like this was part of the world he lived in, the rules he operated under. And suddenly, I understood something I had not before. This was not chaos to him. This was structure. That is not normal, I said quietly. No, he agreed. It is not. The honesty caught me off guard again. I let out a small breath, almost a laugh, but it faded quickly. And you expect me to just adapt to this? I asked. To start thinking like that? He took a step closer, closing the distance fully now, his presence filling the space in a way that made everything else fade slightly into the background. I expect you to survive it, he said. My pulse picked up slightly. Not from fear, but from the intensity of the moment. And the rest? I asked. The rest, he said, his voice lower now, more deliberate, is up to you. The words settled between us again, but this time, they felt different. Less like a warning, more like a challenge. I held his gaze, steady now, not looking away, not backing down. Because something inside me had shifted too. Not completely, not fully, but enough. Enough to understand that this was not just about what had happened tonight. It was about what came after. And for the first time, I felt it clearly. Not fear, not confusion, something sharper, something stronger. The beginning of a decision I had not fully made yet. I straightened slightly, my voice quieter, but steadier than it had been all night. Then I guess I should start paying attention. His eyes held mine for a moment longer, something unreadable passing through them before it settled into something more certain. Then he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. You already are. And somehow, that felt like the most important thing he had said so far. Morning did not arrive the way it used to. There was no gradual light through thin curtains, no distant sound of traffic building into the day. Here, morning was controlled. Precise. The curtains in my room shifted open silently, letting in just enough sunlight to wake me without asking permission. I blinked against it, disoriented for half a second before everything came rushing back. The car. The fire. Him. I sat up slowly, the unfamiliar weight of the bed beneath me reminding me this was not a dream I could shake off. My body felt heavy, like I had slept without actually resting, like my mind had been running all night even if I had closed my eyes. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my feet touching the cool floor, grounding me again in something real. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at my hands. They looked the same. Nothing had changed on the surface, but everything underneath felt different. Sharper, more aware, like I had stepped into a version of myself that I did not recognize yet. A soft knock broke the silence, followed by the door opening before I could respond. The same woman from last night stepped inside, her movements calm, efficient. She carried a tray again, this time with breakfast. Real breakfast, not something rushed or cheap, something deliberate. Good morning, she said gently, setting it down near the window. I nodded slightly, my voice still adjusting. Morning. She studied me for a brief moment, then gave a small approving nod. You slept. I let out a quiet breath. A little. That is enough for now. She gestured toward the tray. You should eat. I glanced at it, then back at her. Do I have a choice? The corner of her mouth lifted slightly. There are many choices. This one is simply recommended. I almost smiled at that, but it faded before it fully formed. Right. She stepped back, pausing at the door. Mr. Vale is expecting you downstairs when you are ready. Of course he was. Nothing about this place felt optional. I will be down soon, I said. She inclined her head slightly and left, the door closing behind her with that same quiet precision I was starting to expect. I stood there for a moment, staring at the tray, then finally moved toward it. The food looked perfect. Too perfect. Like something out of a life I had never lived. I picked up the fork, hesitated, then forced myself to take a bite. It tasted good. That almost made it worse. Because it reminded me how far I was from normal. I ate quickly, not because I was hungry, but because it felt like something I needed to do before facing whatever came next. When I finished, I took a breath, straightened slightly, and headed for the door. The hallway outside was quiet, but not empty. I could feel it immediately. The awareness. The presence. Even when I could not see anyone, I knew they were there. Watching. Tracking. Protecting. Or controlling. Maybe both. I followed the direction I remembered from last night, my steps slower this time, more deliberate, taking in details I had been too overwhelmed to notice before. The artwork on the walls. The subtle placement of cameras. The The way every corner felt intentional, like nothing here was accidental. As I reached the main staircase, I paused for a second, looking down into the open space below. Adrian stood near the center of the room, speaking quietly with the older man from before. His posture was relaxed, but there was nothing casual about him. Every movement was controlled, every word measured. He looked up before I took the first step, like he had already known I was there. Our eyes met, and for a second, everything else faded again. Not completely, just enough. He said something to the man beside him, who nodded once and stepped away, disappearing into the background like he had done before. Adrian did not move immediately. He just watched me descend the stairs, his gaze steady, assessing, but not unkind. When I reached the bottom, I stopped a few feet away, giving myself just enough space to feel like I still had control over something. "Good morning," he said. His voice was the same. Calm. Grounded. Like nothing had happened. I nodded. "You always start your mornings like this?" A faint shift at the corner of his mouth. "Not always." I glanced around briefly, then back at him. "This place feels like it does not have mornings. Just continuations." "That is accurate." I crossed my arms lightly, more out of habit than defensiveness. "So what is today?" He held my gaze, not looking away, not softening. "Today is where you start understanding." My pulse picked up slightly at that. Understanding what? He gestured slightly toward a table nearby, where a tablet rested, its screen already lit. "What you saw." I hesitated for a second, then moved closer, my attention shifting to the screen. There were images. Not chaotic. Not graphic. Controlled. Still frames of the parking lot. Different angles. Different moments. My stomach tightened slightly as I recognized the scene. "You have footage," I said quietly. "Yes." "From last night." "From multiple sources." I studied the images, my eyes tracing details I had not noticed before. The positioning of the car. The reflections in the windows. The timing of movement around it. "You are analyzing it," I said. "We are," he corrected. I glanced up at him. "We." He met my gaze, steady. "You noticed something others did not. That makes your perspective relevant." I blinked, caught off guard by that. "You want me to help?" "I expect you to observe. Not pressure. Not demand. Expectation." That was different. I looked back at the screen, my mind shifting gears, focusing in a way that felt familiar despite everything else being completely foreign. "I only saw the light," I said. "That is enough," he replied. I leaned in slightly, my eyes narrowing. As I studied the frame more closely, the reflection, the angle, the timing, something felt off. Not obvious. Subtle. But there. "Wait," I said quietly. He did not interrupt. He just watched. I pointed slightly, my voice steady now, more certain. "There." His gaze followed mine. "What do you see?" I swallowed once, my focus sharpening. "That reflection, it moves before the car does." The room felt different again. Not tense. Focused. Adrian's expression did not change, but something in his eyes shifted. Recognition. "Good," he said quietly. And for the first time since all of this began, I felt it clearly. Not just that I had been pulled into his world, but that I was starting to stand inside it. I did not move my finger right away. I kept it hovering just above the screen, like if I touched it too soon, the detail would disappear. "It is subtle," I said, my voice quieter now, more focused than I had been since this all started. Adrian stepped closer beside me, not crowding, just close enough that I could feel the shift in attention. "Show me." I leaned in slightly, replaying the clip with a careful swipe. The footage looped. The car sat still. Rain streaked across the lens. Reflections flickered across the surface. Normal. All of it looked normal if you did not know what you were looking for. But now I did. "Watch the window," I said. He did not interrupt. He followed exactly where I pointed. The frame moved again. And there it was. Not the car. Not the light. Something else. A reflection that did not match the timing of everything around it. It shifted half a second too early. Too precise to be random. Too controlled to be natural. Adrian's eyes narrowed just slightly. "Again," he said. I replayed it. Slower this time. The movement became clearer when you knew where to look. A shadow crossing behind the reflection. Not visible directly. Only through what it disrupted. I felt my pulse pick up, not from fear this time, but from recognition. "Someone was already there," I said. "Before you even reached the car." He did not respond immediately. He watched the footage one more time, his gaze sharper now, more focused. Then he straightened slightly. "Yes." The confirmation landed differently. He did not sound surprised. He sounded certain, like this piece fit into something larger he had already been considering. I looked up at him, studying his expression. You expected that. It was not a question. He met my gaze. I considered it. That was his version of expecting. I let out a small breath, my mind racing ahead now, connecting pieces that did not fully exist yet. That means whoever did this was close enough to monitor your movements in real time. Yes. And confident enough to stay in position until the last possible moment. Yes. Each answer came the same way. Calm. Direct. No hesitation. I glanced back at the screen, my focus narrowing again. They were watching you. They always are. The way he said it made it clear this was not new. This was not unusual. This was part of his world. I shook my head slightly, processing that. That is not normal. No, he said again. It is not. I stared at the screen for another second, then something else clicked into place. A detail I had almost missed. Wait, I said, my voice tightening slightly. If they were already there, then the timing was not just about you. He did not move, but I felt his attention sharpen beside me. Explain. I pointed again, my finger tracing the moment just before the reflection shifted. They did not trigger anything until you were about to get in, I said. That means they needed confirmation. Visual confirmation. His gaze followed my logic instantly. Yes. My chest tightened slightly. Which means they were watching you directly. Not just tracking your schedule. He nodded once. Correct. I pulled my hand back slowly, my thoughts racing faster now. So whoever did this, they were not just guessing where you would be. I looked up at him, the realization settling in fully now. They knew exactly where you would stand. The room felt different again. Not tense. Not heavy. Focused. Sharpened. Adrian's expression did not change, but something in his eyes did. Something colder. Not emotional. Precise. Yes, he said quietly. I swallowed. The weight of that settling in deeper than anything else so far. That is not just access, I said. That is proximity. It is. I took a small step back, my arms crossing again without thinking, my body trying to contain the shift happening inside me. So this is not just someone who wants you gone, I said. This is someone who knows you. He held my gaze, unflinching. Yes. The simplicity of it made everything feel more real, more immediate, more dangerous in a way I could not ignore anymore. I let out a slow breath, forcing myself to stay focused instead of letting that spiral. Okay, I said quietly. Then we narrow it down. He did not speak. He waited, letting me continue. That was new. I looked back at the screen, my mind shifting into something more structured, more deliberate. Who has that level of access? I asked. People who work with you. People who see you regularly. People who know your habits. Yes. And people you trust enough not to question their presence. His gaze sharpened slightly. Yes. I nodded slowly, the pieces aligning in a way that felt both logical and unsettling. So this is not random, I said again, more firmly this time. This is internal. The word hung in the air between us. Internal. Not outside threat. Not distant enemy. Someone inside his world. Someone close enough to see without being seen. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then he reached forward and paused the footage at the exact frame I had been focusing on. The reflection froze. The shadow barely visible. Good, he said again, his voice lower now, more deliberate. Not just acknowledging. Approving. I felt something shift in my chest at that. Not pride. Not exactly. Something steadier. Like I had stepped into a role without realizing it. So what happens now? I asked. He turned slightly, facing me fully again. Now we identify who had access to that position at that time. And how do you do that? He held my gaze, steady, certain. By looking at who was not where they were supposed to be. The logic was simple. Clean. Effective. I nodded slowly. Absence instead of presence. Yes. I glanced back at the screen one more time. The image burned into my mind now in a way I knew would not fade. Then you already have a list, I said. I do. And I am guessing it is not a long one. No. The room felt quieter again, but not empty. Focused. Like everything was narrowing towards something inevitable. I took a breath, then looked at him again. And where do I fit into that? He did not hesitate. You continue to observe. I frowned slightly. That is it. For now. I studied him for a second, then nodded. Because I understood. This was not about keeping me busy. This was about using what I had already proven I could do. See what others missed. I looked back at the screen one last time, then straightened slightly, my voice quieter, but more certain than it had been before. Then I will keep watching. He held my gaze for a moment, something unreadable passing through his eyes before it settled again. Then he gave a small nod. Good. And for the first time since all of this began, I did not feel like I was just reacting to what was happening. I felt like I was becoming part of it. The room did not feel the same anymore. It was not just a place with screens and quiet voices and controlled movements. It had become something sharper. A center point. A place where decisions were forming before they were spoken. I stood there for a second after he said it, letting the silence stretch just long enough to understand what had changed. I was not just standing next to him anymore. I was standing inside the process. That realization settled deeper than I expected. Not fear. Not exactly. Something more focused. So you already know who to look at? I said quietly, my eyes still on the frozen frame of the reflection. Adrian did not answer immediately. He reached forward and dimmed the screen slightly, not turning it off, just shifting it out of focus. I know where to start, he said. I turned toward him fully, my attention no longer split between the footage and the conversation. That means you suspect someone. I consider possibilities. His tone did not change, but there was something underneath it now. Not uncertainty. Precision. He was not guessing. He was narrowing. I crossed my arms lightly, my mind already moving ahead. And you do not tell them. No, you do not confront them. Not yet. I nodded slowly, the logic settling into place. You watch them. This time, there was a slight shift in his expression. Not surprise. Recognition. Yes. I let out a small breath, almost a quiet exhale of understanding. So this is not just about finding out who did it, I said. It is about letting them think they got away with it. He held my gaze, steady, approving, in a way that did not need words. Exactly. The room felt different again. Not tense. Not heavy. Strategic. Like every movement from this point forward mattered in ways I was only starting to understand. I glanced around briefly, noticing the subtle presence of others in the room again. Not close enough to interrupt. Close enough to act if needed. Always there. So what do they think right now? I asked. Whoever did this. Adrian moved slightly, resting one hand against the edge of the table, his posture relaxed but deliberate. They think the attempt failed, he said. But they do not know why. I frowned slightly. They will assume something went wrong. Yes. A mistake. A timing issue. Something they can correct. Yes. I shook my head slowly, the implications building in my mind. So they will try again. The words came out before I could stop them. Not fear. Just logic. His gaze did not waver. Eventually, my chest tightened slightly at the certainty in his voice. Not if. When. And you are just going to wait for that? I asked. No. He straightened slightly, his presence shifting again, more focused now. I am going to make sure they believe they still have the opportunity. I blinked, caught off guard by that. You are going to let them think you are vulnerable. I am going to let them think they understand the situation. The distinction mattered. I could feel it. I nodded slowly, my thoughts catching up. And while they do that, you watch who moves. Yes. I looked back at the screen, the frozen reflection now burned into my memory in a way that felt permanent. You are not just finding the person who did this, I said. You are finding everyone connected to it. He did not answer, but he did not need to. The silence confirmed it. I let out a slow breath, my mind adjusting again, expanding to match the scale of what he was actually doing. This was not reaction. This was control. That is, I started, then stopped, searching for the right word. Bigger than I thought. It usually is. His tone remained calm, but there was something behind it now. Not pride. Not arrogance. Experience. I turned back to him, studying him more carefully now. Not just the way he spoke. The way he thought. The way he moved through situations. Like this without hesitation. You have done this before, I said. It was not a question. He met my gaze. Yes. The answer was simple. Expected. But it landed differently now. Because I understood what it meant. This was not new territory for him. This was familiar ground. And I was the one who was new. I shifted my weight slightly, my arms loosening as my body adjusted to the space in a way that felt more natural than it should have. So where does that leave me? I asked. In the middle of something I do not fully understand. He stepped closer again, not enough to close the space completely, but enough to make the conversation feel more direct. It leaves you exactly where you need to be. I frowned slightly. That sounds like something you would say to keep me calm. It is something I say because it is true. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. The certainty in it carried enough weight on its own. I held his gaze for a second, searching for anything that felt like doubt. There was none. You are using me, I said finally. Not accusing, just stating what had become obvious. He did not deny it. I am using your perspective. That is not the same thing. No, the answer came without hesitation. Because I am also protecting it. I blinked, caught off guard again. Protecting my perspective? Yes. I let out a small breath, trying to make sense of that. That is a very specific way of saying it. Specific matters. I shook my head slightly, a faint, almost amused disbelief slipping through despite everything. You are not an easy person to argue with. There was the smallest shift at the corner of his mouth again. Not quite a smile, but close. I am not trying to argue. No, I said quietly. You are trying to convince me. No, that made me pause. Then what are you doing? He held my gaze, steady, unflinching. I am telling you the truth. The words settled differently than anything else he had said so far. Not strategic. Not calculated. Just direct. I looked at him for a long second, my thoughts slowing, narrowing, focusing on that single point. Truth. Not comfort. Not manipulation. Truth. I took a slow breath, my shoulders relaxing slightly as something inside me shifted again. Not completely. Not fully. But enough. Enough to stand a little steadier in a place that still did not belong to me. Okay, I said quietly. He did not respond. He waited, always waiting for the moment to settle before moving forward. Then I will keep telling you what I see, I continued, even if it does not fit what you expect. His eyes held mine, something sharper flickering beneath the surface now. Approval. That is exactly what I need. The words were simple, but they carried weight. I nodded once, accepting it, even if I did not fully understand where it would lead yet. The room felt different again. Not overwhelming, not unfamiliar, just new. And for the first time since this began, I realized something I had not allowed myself to consider before. I was not just trying to survive this anymore. I was starting to understand it. And that changed everything. By the time the room settled back into silence, I realized something had shifted again. Not in the space. In him. Adrian was no longer just observing. He was waiting. And not for the footage. Not for confirmation. For something else. I felt it before I understood it. A tension that did not belong to fear, but to timing. Like something was about to happen, and he had already decided how it would unfold. You are expecting something, I said quietly. He did not answer right away. His gaze moved briefly past me, toward the far side of the room, where one of his men stood almost completely still, his attention fixed on something I could not see. Then Adrian looked back at me. Yes. One word. But it carried weight. I felt my pulse shift, not faster, but sharper. From who? He studied me for a second, like he was deciding how much to say. Then, from someone who believes they are still in control. I frowned slightly. And they are not. No, the certainty in his voice did not leave room for doubt. I crossed my arms lightly, my mind moving through everything we had already established. Internal access. Real-time observation. Someone close. So what changes now? I asked. He took a small step back, just enough to widen the space between us again, but not enough to disconnect. Now we stop reacting, he said, and we start directing. The word landed differently. Directing. Not responding. Not defending. Controlling. I glanced toward the screen again, then back at him. How? By creating a situation they cannot ignore. I felt my chest tighten slightly. You mean drawing them out? Yes. I shook my head slowly. That sounds risky. It is. He did not soften it. He did not reframe it. Just accepted it as fact. I let out a breath, my thoughts catching up. And you are going to do that here? No, he paused just long enough to make sure I was paying attention before finishing. You are. The words hit harder than anything else he had said so far. Not because of what they meant. Because of how direct they were. I blinked, caught off guard. Me? He held my gaze, steady, unflinching. Yes. I shook my head immediately, instinct kicking in before logic could catch up. No. I am not part of whatever this is. I just saw something. That does not mean I should be used as bait. He did not react to the word. He did not argue. He just watched me, letting the reaction settle before he responded. You already are part of this, he said quietly. Whether you choose to acknowledge it or not. My jaw tightened slightly. That does not mean I have to walk into it. You already did. The reminder was calm. Unavoidable. I looked away for a second, my chest rising and falling with a sharper breath than I wanted to show. He was right. I knew that. But knowing it and accepting it were not the same thing. Then explain it to me, I said, turning back to him. All of it. No half answers. No controlled information. If you want me involved, then I need to understand what you are actually asking. The room felt different again. Not tense. Focused. Like something had just shifted into place. Adrian studied me for a long moment, not dismissing the demand, not deflecting it, considering it. Then he nodded once. Fair. The word was simple, but it changed everything. He moved toward the table, tapping the screen once to bring up a different set of images. Not the parking lot. Not the car. Something else. Names. Locations. Timelines. My eyes moved quickly across the information, trying to take it in, trying to understand the pattern. These are people who had access to my schedule. He said, directly or indirectly. I scanned the list, my mind already picking up on small inconsistencies. Timing overlaps. Gaps. Shifts that did not quite line up. And one of them was there, I said. Yes. I looked up at him. And you think they are going to try again? Eventually. But not if they think they have been exposed. Correct. I exhaled slowly, the logic building in a way that felt both clear and dangerous. So you need them to feel confident again. Yes. I shook my head slightly, the pieces clicking together whether I wanted them to or not. And I am the variable they cannot account for. His gaze sharpened slightly. Exactly. I let out a quiet breath, my arms dropping to my sides as the resistance I had been holding onto shifted into something else. Not acceptance. Not fully. But understanding. So what does that look like? I asked. His voice lowered slightly, more deliberate now. It looks like you being seen. My chest tightened again, but this time I did not step back. Seen how? In a way that suggests you know more than you should. The implications settled in immediately. Not subtle. Not safe. Intentional. I swallowed once, my mind running through the possibilities, the risks, the outcomes. And then what? Then we watch who reacts. The simplicity of it made it feel more dangerous, not less. Because it meant everything depended on timing. On perception. On reading the right signal at the right moment. I looked at him for a long second, weighing everything, feeling the weight of the decision pressing in from all sides. And you are sure you can control what happens after that? It was not a challenge. It was a requirement. He did not hesitate. Yes. The certainty in his voice did not feel like arrogance. It felt like experience. Like something he had already measured, already accounted for. I let out a slow breath, my shoulders rising and falling as I made the shift I had been resisting since the beginning. Not into his world. I was already there. Into my role inside it. Okay, I said quietly. He did not move. He did not interrupt. He waited. Always waiting for the decision to land fully before acknowledging it. Then I need to know exactly what you want me to do. I continued, my voice steadier now. Not. Just the idea. The details. His eyes held mine, something sharper settling behind them now. Not just approval. Alignment. You will, he said. And for the first time since this began, I understood something clearly. This was not just about surviving what had already happened. This was about stepping forward into what came next. And this time, it would not be an accident. The moment I said yes, everything accelerated. Not visibly, not loudly, but I felt it. In the way the room shifted around us. In the way the quiet conversations in the background became more deliberate. In the way Adrian did not hesitate anymore. He turned back to the screen, his movements precise, controlled, like he had been waiting for that answer before allowing anything else to move forward. Then we do this correctly, he said. Not to me. Not entirely. To the room. To the system around him that responded without needing further instruction. The screen changed again. The list narrowed. Names disappeared. Only a few remained. I stepped closer, my attention sharpening instantly. You already filtered them, I said. Based on access and timing. Yes. I studied the remaining names, my eyes moving quickly, searching for patterns that were not immediately obvious. There were only 3 now. 3 people who had both the access and the opportunity. And you think one of them was there? I said. One of them was, he corrected. Not possibility. Certainty. I glanced up at him. You sound very sure. Because the margin for error was small, he replied. This was not random placement. It required precision. I nodded slowly, my mind aligning with his. So whoever did this, they are careful. Yes. And patient. Yes. I exhaled slowly, my focus tightening. Then they will not react to something obvious. He looked at me, his expression unchanged but his attention sharper. Explain. I gestured slightly toward the screen. If you suddenly change your behavior, increase security, or isolate yourself, they will notice, I said. And they will pull back. He did not interrupt. He let me continue. But if everything looks normal, I added, if nothing feels different, then they stay confident. And confidence leads to exposure, he finished. I nodded once. Exactly. The room felt sharper again. Not tense. Focused. Like every word was narrowing the path forward. Adrian stepped slightly closer, not invading my space, but aligning with it. So how do we create that, he asked. Not testing. Not challenging. Asking. That changed something. I looked at the screen again, then back at him. You keep everything the same, I said. Same routines. Same movements. Same visibility. And you? I hesitated for half a second, then answered. I become part of that normal. His gaze held mine, steady. Explain. I took a breath, organizing the thought before I spoke it. Right now, I am the unknown, I said. They do not know what I saw. They do not know what I understand. That makes me unpredictable. Yes. So you remove that uncertainty, I continued. You let them see me. Not hidden. Not protected in a way that looks unusual. Just present. The word hung there for a second. Simple, but intentional. Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly, not in disagreement, but in focus. And what does that tell them? He asked. That I am not a threat, I said. Or at least, not one you are concerned about. He watched me for a moment, then nodded once. Good. The approval was quiet, but it carried weight. I felt it settle somewhere deeper than I expected. Not validation. Alignment. And then, he asked. Then we wait, I said. Not for action, for reaction. He leaned slightly against the table, his posture relaxed but his attention fully engaged. What kind of reaction? Not obvious ones, I replied. Subtle ones. Changes in behavior. Timing. Presence. I pointed lightly toward the list on the screen. One of them will adjust. Not dramatically. Just enough. And you think you will see it. It was not doubt. It was confirmation. I met his gaze, steady now. I think I already know what to look for. The silence that followed was different. Not empty. Decisive. Like something had just locked into place. Adrian reached forward and tapped the screen again, isolating one of the names briefly before returning to the full list. Not choosing yet. Just marking the shift. Then we proceed, he said. His voice was calm. Final. I felt my pulse steady, not because the situation was less dangerous, but because it was clearer now. Defined. When? I asked. Now, he said. Of course. No delay. No hesitation. The system around him had already started moving. I could feel it. Doors opening somewhere. Conversations shifting. Plans adjusting. He turned back to me fully, his gaze. Steady, direct. You will stay close, he said. Visible. Natural. I nodded once. And I do not act unless I see something. Correct. I took a slow breath, grounding myself in the simplicity of that instruction. Observe. Do not force. Do not assume. Watch. He stepped closer, just enough that his presence filled the space between us again. Not overwhelming, but undeniable. Lily, he said, my name quieter now, more deliberate. I looked up at him, meeting his gaze without hesitation. What you see matters. The words were simple, but they carried more weight than anything else he had said so far. Because they were not about the situation. They were about me. I nodded slowly, the meaning settling deeper than I expected. I understand. He held my gaze for a moment longer, something unreadable passing through his eyes before it settled again into that same controlled certainty. Then he stepped back, the space shifting again as he moved. Then let them watch, he said. The line landed differently. Not as a command. As a declaration. I turned slightly, my attention moving toward the entrance of the room, where movement had already begun to increase, subtle but unmistakable. People adjusting. Positions shifting. Everything aligning around a plan that was already in motion. And for the first time since this began, I did not feel like I was being carried forward by it. I felt like I was walking into it on purpose. Not blindly. Not accidentally. Intentionally. I took a breath, steadying myself, then moved forward. Not away. Not back. Forward. And somewhere behind me, I could feel it. Not just his presence. His attention. Locked. Watching. Not to control. Not to command. To see what I would do next. And this time, I knew exactly what I was looking for. I did not rush. That was the first thing I understood. Nothing in this place moved without intention, and if I moved too quickly, I would stand out in a way that mattered. So I slowed down. Not artificially. Naturally. Like I belonged here. Like I had always belonged here. The hallway stretched ahead of me, quiet but alive in a way I could feel now instead of fear. Subtle shifts in posture. Small glances that were not meant to be obvious. People who were not just walking, but observing while they moved. I matched it. Not perfectly. Not yet. But enough. Enough to blend into the rhythm instead of disrupting it. My steps were steady, my breathing even, my eyes moving without locking onto anything too long. Watching. Always watching. The first person I passed barely looked at me. That was expected. Neutral. No reaction. The second gave a brief nod. Polite. Controlled. Also expected. But the third paused. It was small. Almost nothing. A fraction of a second where his movement did not align with the rest of his body. His eyes flickered toward me, then away, but not fast enough. Not smooth enough. I did not stop. I did not react. I kept walking, letting my peripheral vision do the work instead of turning my head. The details settled in my mind like a mark I could return to later. Not proof. Not yet. Just a point. I turned the corner slowly, my pace unchanged, my posture relaxed. The main room opened up again, the same space where everything had shifted earlier. People were moving through it, conversations low, controlled, nothing out of place on the surface. But I could see it now. The differences. The patterns. The absence. My gaze moved across the room once, not searching for anything specific, just letting the details come to me. And then I saw it. One of the names from the list. Not the first one I had noticed. Another. He stood near the far side of the room, speaking with someone else, his posture composed, his expression neutral. Perfect. Too perfect. I slowed slightly as I passed through the space, just enough to bring myself closer without making it obvious. My eyes did not lock onto him. They moved past him, then back again, like I was just taking in the room. But my attention stayed. He did not look at me. Not directly. But I saw the shift. The smallest adjustment in his stance. The way his shoulders tightened just slightly before relaxing again. The way his conversation paused for half a second too long before continuing. He had noticed me. Not as a person. As a variable. My pulse remained steady, but something inside me sharpened. Not fear. Recognition. I kept moving, crossing the room without stopping, without acknowledging anything that felt out of place. Because that was the point. I was not here to confront. I was here to be seen. I reached the far side of the room and paused briefly near a window, looking out into the open space beyond. My reflection stared back at me faintly in the glass. Calm. Controlled. Not the same girl who had been standing in a parking lot the night before. That version of me would have looked away. Would have questioned everything. Would have tried to understand before acting. This version just watched. I let a few seconds pass, then turned slightly, just enough to bring the room back into my line of sight, without making it obvious I was checking anything. And there it was again. The shift. Not from the first man. From the second. The one by the far wall. He was no longer speaking. Not actively. Just standing there. His attention split between the person in front of him and something else. Someone else. Me. He did not look directly. He did not need to. The tension in his posture said enough. The timing said more. I exhaled slowly, letting the realization settle fully this time. Not one reaction. Two. 2 points on the same line. 2 people adjusting in ways that did not match the rest of the room. That was not coincidence. That was connection. I turned back toward the center of the room, my steps measured, my expression neutral. I did not rush back. I did not signal anything. Because I did not need to. He was already watching. I could feel it. Adrian had not moved. Not visibly. But his attention had shifted. Not to the room. To me. I crossed the distance between us slowly, stopping just within reach, but not too close. Not breaking the pattern. Not drawing attention. Two. I said quietly, my voice low enough that it did not carry. His gaze met mine instantly. Focused. Sharp. Which two? Not a question. A directive. I did not turn. I did not point. I kept my eyes on him as I answered. The one near the west wall? I said. And the one who paused when I entered the hall. His expression did not change. But something in his eyes did. Not surprise. Confirmation. He had seen it too. Or he had expected it. Timing, he asked. Both adjusted within 3 seconds of visual contact, I replied. Not enough to be obvious. Enough to matter. He held my gaze for a moment longer, then gave the smallest nod. Not approval. Alignment. Good, he said quietly. The word landed differently now. Not just acknowledgement. Trust. I felt it settle deeper than anything else had so far. Not because of what it meant for him. Because of what it meant for me. I had seen it. Not guessed. Not assumed. Seen it. And it mattered. I let out a slow breath, my shoulders relaxing just slightly as the weight of everything shifted into something clearer. More defined. This was not chaos. This was structure. This was not fear. This was awareness. Adrian's voice came again, quieter this time, more deliberate. You just changed the board. I looked at him, meeting his gaze without hesitation. No, I said softly. I just showed you where it moved. The silence that followed was not empty. It was final. Because in that moment, everything aligned. Not just the plan. Not just the situation. Us. And for the first time since this began, I understood something completely. He did not pull me into his world because I needed protection. He pulled me in because I could see it the way he did. And once you see something like that, you do not go back to who you were before.